Okay, for our first interview on Sports Entertainers, we are joined by a professional wrestler from Scotland, where he was trained by some of the UK's finest. He's been all around the world in the last 10 years, but likely best known for his time in Impact Wrestling, where he is currently the Digital Impact Media Champion. The local hero, Joe Hendry. Welcome to Sports Entertainers, man.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Again, just really appreciate it. Again, we got to see you during your time here at Sacrifice. Obviously, familiar with you and Impact as the digital media champion. But to kick things off, man, you guys are just coming back from Australia. It's a big tour for you guys. I mean, a short tour but a big exposure. And seen a lot about it, so we wanted to kind of kick things off with that and kind of ask how it was to travel over there, see the country, and perform in front of their fans.
That would be the second time I've ever been to Australia. The first time was 2018 when I represented Scotland in the Commonwealth Games. But this is the first time I've ever been there as a professional wrestler. So it was pretty cool. It was a nice moment in my life actually to be there under different circumstances 5 years after the first time I'd been. And it was an honor as well to be a part of that tour, which was a big moment for the company as well. International expansion is something that's a huge priority for us. So I was honored to be there and to be one of the talents that were selected to go. I think it was my favorite ever wrestling trip, to be honest with you. It was a great crew. We got to experience some of the culture, and the crowds were just amazing. Some of the best crowds that I can ever remember performing in front of.
Yeah.
I was actually going to jump in and ask about that, the crowds and how loud they are there. How is it there?
Yeah, it was awesome. I think, with it being Impact's first ever time there, I have to be honest, I hadn't heard of Wagga Wagga before the tour had been announced. I'd only ever been to the Gold Coast. Obviously, I knew about Sydney and Melbourne. I've got family in Adelaide. But I'd never heard of Wagga Wagga, and so some of the fans were, saying it was like a random location to choose to go to start with, but we couldn't have picked anywhere better to start with because we went over there and the houses were packed and they were super loud, and it was yeah, some of my favorite wrestling memories both inside the ring and outside the ring.
That's cool, man.
So you're coming here from Australia to Windsor now. So what are some of your experiences with our Windsor crowds? So you come in here for Slammiversary, and how has the Windsor crowd been for you?
So it's actually interesting you say that. Impact put up a clip the other day from the first time I ever set foot in Impact Wrestling. I was with Impact very briefly for a few months in 2018, and I was wrestling Eli Drake, who is now known as LA Knight. And any opportunity to make fun of him is an absolute privilege. So so went out there, and that was an amazing experience as well. And the Windsor crowd, that's where it was, same venue, and they were right behind me as well. So it was pretty cool to see them put that clip back up there 5 years later. And it's funny how things change, and so much has happened in 5 years. So that was pretty cool. But seeing that clip reminded me of how awesome, even then, before I'd kind of been on TV before. The crowd were a very educated crowd. They knew who I was even back then. So it's pretty cool to again come back after, obviously I was there at Sacrifice, but it is 5 years later. So to still have that connection with the crowd, it was awesome. But yeah, I remember watching that clip and thinking to myself, it's pretty awesome that that's a real high pressure environment when you're debuting for a company like Impact Wrestling. And when I did in 2018, the Windsor crowd were right there for me. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, man. Not to like pump our own tires too much, but I have noticed that a few times when we have the tapings here, it's almost like they select this crowd for some debuts because we're anticipating or hoping for a good reaction, right? And yeah, obviously we have some good faithful here in Windsor when it comes to the wrestling crowds. And always with welcoming arms. We'd love to have the professional wrestling here, right?
Yeah, I mean like I say for myself, I spent a couple of years stuck indoors, because of lockdown and COVID and things like
Yeah.
that. So I take none of it for granted, it's a hard job. It's the hardest job I've ever had, but it's also happens to be the best job I've ever had. It's such an honor and a privilege to tour the world, to represent Impact Wrestling as a champion. And Windsor, as you know, is it's a key market for us. That's why we're choosing to have an event like Slammiversary there, and we're all very excited about it.
Speaking of Slammiversary, your opponent was just announced, Kenny King.
Mhm.
Tell us about your program with him and how are you excited going into this match?
Yeah, I mean, Kenny King is, first of all, Kenny King is phenomenal. Well, he's one of the most underrated wrestlers in the entire business. Kenny King is one of the most consistent, top quality professional wrestlers in the world today. So it is an honor and a privilege to compete with him at Slammiversary. Now, that being the case, that doesn't take away from the fact that Kenny spent a year in the Chippendales. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't make pop songs to make fun of that. So I can't say for sure, but that Stripper Kenny music video that I made may get into the hands of the audio engineer at Windsor, and it may be played again for the live crowd. I don't know. I can't confirm, but I'd say that's a fairly safe bet. So if we can do that, that's going to be a lot of fun.
So actually, you mentioned those pop songs. Can you bring up the creative process when it comes to those pop songs? How
Oh
much
man.
how much input do you get? How much how much of it is you when it comes to those songs?
What do you mean how much is me?
As in like writing and producing and putting it
Yeah.
together and all that. It's all you, right?
So yeah, I'd say I write what this is how it goes. So I write the songs. The only help that I have, I actually film them all myself as well. So I had to learn how to film them by necessity to start with. Without going into too many details. There was a time in my life where there was no one else willing to film these videos, so I had to learn how to film them myself. Because it again, especially like with lockdown and stuff like that, it's like, all right, well, I guess I got to learn how to just self produce and self film my own content. I used to get help with filming these videos, but even the latest one, the Kenny video, I literally hired that studio for an hour. I think I was in there for about an hour and 20. They let me go over by 20 minutes. And I took two camera stands and my two cameras. I got two of these, and yeah, I filmed them all myself. I write them myself. Where I do get some help actually is I work with an audio engineer, and there's a guy called Neil who co-produces them with me. So what he's really good at is, when I come up with these creative ideas, he'll pick the piano sound, or he'll say, "Hey, we've got this drum sound, or we've got why," you know what I mean, that sort of thing. So I I know exactly what BPM I want it to be. I've already written the songs out. I know all the lyrics. I know the chords. I know how it is going to go in my head. And Neil is very good at picking the instruments that we're going to use. But having him, he's possibly the best audio engineer I've ever worked with. So he's awesome. So yeah, that's the only help that I get with it. I edit them myself as well using Adobe Premiere Pro. But the scary thing about it is it's very like, I'm a huge South Park fan, and it's very like creating South Park episodes. So I just have no good ideas until it's about 12 hours before I have to leave the house. So that's how it goes. I remember, so the Matt Cardona one, the Edge's Bitch one, it was originally going to be a parody of his entrance theme. And I remember I called Robert, who's you know, he's the head of our creative. I think head writer, I believe, would be or head of creative would be the term. And I remember calling him. I was just saying, look, I the song we'd chosen, it was going to be a parody of Matt Cardona's Engines. I was like, it's not the one. I was like, I need to write something from scratch. I've got this idea, and they just let me go and do it. So I called Neil, and I filmed it. That I recorded it in the audio for it in his studio, took it home here to the house, filmed the scenes in my hall, and edited it, you know, about like with about 20 minutes to spare before I had to leave the airport. It's insane. It's so intense, but it's just I just don't think I think if I spread it over the course of a week, I'd be working on it for the entire week. You know, there's that Elon Musk principle, which is you'll take as much time as you've allocated to do the task. And unfortunately for me, it seems to be the 24 hours before I leave the house to go across the sea. So, but yeah, as I look back on it and hearing the audience react to it, there's no better feeling. I remember before I came back to Impact, there was a few moments on the independents. And I just remember thinking, man, you know, even if this is it, even if this is just doing these in front of a couple hundred people, I'll still do it, you know. And now here I am. So it's been an amazing vehicle to help me get to where I want to go.
Well, that's really cool to hear, man. That's really cool. Because even like, to your point, I mean, to allude to a lot of your points, I mean, it's a lot like South Park, you know, just that week, whatever is hot, whatever is funny, they make an episode about it, right? So that's the way to do it, I guess, right?
It's interesting as well when people ask them about which episodes they like and they don't like, they get it totally wrong. So basically the fan favorite episode of South Park overwhelmingly tends to be Make Love Not Warcraft, which I
Yeah.
believe is the first episode of season 10. But they hated that episode and they're like, this is the worst thing ever. And I identify with that every single time. Because by the time I finished this song, I've recorded it, I've written it, I've recorded it, I've filmed it, I've edited it. I've heard it 387 times, 692 times. It's not funny to me anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So I just hope it's funny to the people who hear it. And then when you get to so you go through all these these moments where you're like, oh, it's not funny, it's not funny. And then you get to the venue and the audience hear it and they laugh and you go, ah, and then you try and get a bit of sleep and then you repeat the process.
So on the topic of comedy and wrestling, I can't really speak for Drake, but I love comedy in my wrestling. And but there's a few people against the idea. What is your message towards those kind of people, and just your overall view on comedy and wrestling?
Well, look, I think it's that's quite a broad question because comedy in wrestling could be, you know, when The Rock makes fun of someone in a promo, all the way to throwing an invisible grenade in a match that everybody reacts to, right? I am not a fan of things that bend the realities of space and time in our universe. So you will I will likely be invulnerable to any invisible grenades that are thrown at any point in my career. I don't think you'll see me react to any of those. But if you look at someone like Kurt Angle, who I've had the privilege of wrestling, he is an Olympic gold medalist, but he never had any issues with, you know, being the butt of the joke or making fun of his opponents or himself. And, you know, in his prime, he was, you know, obviously I've done amateur wrestling as well. I've been a national champion myself at a lower level. So, you know, Kurt was much tougher than me in his prime, and he found it, he seemed to thrive in comedy and wrestling. So, you know, I don't see why you know, it would be an issue for me, basically. I think that when I think about my favorite moments in wrestling, it's when you know, when I used to watch it when I was younger. It was The Rock would say something outrageous to one of the bad guys, and they would just be furious about it, and the audience would be laughing in hilarity. And those are, to be honest with you, some of my favorite memories of wrestling. I remember downloading these promos on you know, it was like LimeWire and Napster and things
Yeah.
like that way back in the
Doing your
day, and I just
computer.
watched. Yeah, I'd watch like the same Rock promo like 100 times, you know. So it's like that to me. It was those are probably my when comedy and wrestling is done right. It's, you know, there's nothing better.
Well, at the end of the day, it's entertainment, right?
But that's the key, though. That's the key.
Mhm.
Without naming names, sometimes comedy doesn't always go. Bad comedy in wrestling, there's nothing worse, So that's the thing.
Hmm.
It's got to be good comedy. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's you can't. To me, it's all situation and context dependent.
Yeah.
You can't write off an entire subgenre of something, but you also can't, um, you know overwhelmingly praise it as a whole, because to me it's context dependent. Don't
Yeah.
worry though, my stuff's awesome. That's all
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's it's been great, man. I mean, got back to the creative a little bit too. I mean, even your theme
yeah.
song, like when we were at Sacrifice, Kurlis was like, "This is awesome. Like this guy is hilarious." Like, so it just goes to show, just even the smallest things make a big difference. And to kind of start to wrap this thing up as we're getting close here, we talked a lot about creative, and I mean, working with Windsor's own in Impact Wrestling, Scott Demore, probably a great creative mind to be working with, and allows you to
Yeah.
do a lot of what you
Yeah.
do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is, to be honest, that's the main reason that I came to Impact Wrestling. I've had offers from uh obviously I was signed to Ring of Honor, and I had offers from two other organizations, but I chose to come to Impact Wrestling. And the reason that I chose to come to Impact Wrestling, the main reason, there's many reasons, but there are actually a couple reasons. So the main one is I knew that I was going to be allowed to do my thing. And that's the thing I love about Impact Wrestling, is I think that Impact lets each talent put their best foot forward. Each talent is allowed to lead with what they do best. So it's like, um I feel like, rather than try to impose, creative on a talent or whatever, they work with the talent to help them produce their best stuff. And to me, that's when wrestling is most fun. And that's kind of what it's all about for me. It's about helping the audience have fun. And if we can inject some fun into the creative process as well. So I have sometimes I just have to pinch myself that this is my job. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to do the things I've been able to do in my life. And the fact that when I signed to Impact Wrestling, I remember, I called up and they said, "What do you want to do for your debut vignette?" So I was like, and so my debut vignette, I don't know if you saw it, but it involved me. It was this elaborate sketch where there's a dude in a hospital bed, and there's he's barely alive. The heart monitor's there, and then my entrance music plays. I burst in the hospital room. The family's like, "Yay!" They're clapping along, and they don't notice that the heart monitor has flatlined while I've walked in. So me distracting everyone has caused this person to die, but they're fine. They don't care because Joe Hendry's in the room. Now, imagine me describing this to you and going, "Yeah, so I'm going to go and film that, and you're going to put it on TV." And to leave that in the hands of a talent, I thought, wow, they really trust me, so I better make them. So I give them three sketches like that. And then so that's reason number one, is the creative process is amazing, because I've always loved to do my own stuff. But the thing about creative and Impact is they take my ideas and they make them better. I've always, on the indies, I've always done all my own stuff. I've always done, all my own creative. But in Impact, it's been such a great experience to go, oh, actually, this is it. I hate to use the word synergy because it's so overused, but it is true that is the process where we're working together. And the other reason is because back when I was with Impact in 2018, I came across an interview that Scott did with a paper in the United Kingdom. It might have been the Mirror, I can't remember. But he said, "Who do you think could be a future world champion in Impact Wrestling?" And he said Moose, he said Josh Alexander, and he said me. And I was like, and I discovered this interview in retrospect. And when I was choosing where to go, I was like, well, if Scott believes that this is what I've got the capability to do, he obviously understands my creative drive, and understands the work and the effort that I'm going to put into this. That's probably where I should be. And hey, we ain't a million miles away, right?
Hey, well, you're doing something right, man. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, thanks so much for taking the time to do this with time to wrap it up, and we're really looking forward to seeing you at Slammiversary.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.